Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick Expert Reviews. Today we've got the Windows 11 versus SteamOS. I've got SteamOS on a separate SSD, which is exactly the same SSD as I've got the Windows 11 installed on. So we're going to start with Windows 11 first. So as you can see, this is Armoury Crates and just checking in how things are in July 2025 with Armoury Crate and the Windows itself as a gaming platform. So as you can see, obviously everything can be accessed via controller, all the settings and everything you want to access. I'm going to show you my fan curve as well, just in case anyone is wondering, and just to confirm that, yeah, that's a typical Windows experience or Armoury Crate experience, or both actually. Yeah, so some things work, some things don't work. Sometimes you need to use the touch screen, sometimes you need to use the D-pad and stuff like that. But overall, I tend to use Armoury Crate for all my games. That is GOG games, that is Xbox games, PC Game Pass games, and so on. And most of the AAA titles I run in turbo mode. So if it's handheld, it's obviously 25 watts. If it's docked, then it's 30 watts. So yeah, that's Armoury Crate, and as you can see, it's flashing. And then obviously, as it is Windows, you also have the AMD Adrenaline, where you can access things like RSR, or the AMFM 2.1, which I did do a video on recently as well. Link will be in the video description below. So as you can see, Fallout 76, I usually play with AMFM 2.1 switched on. Same with RSR. However, for the purpose of that, I'm just going to switch both options off, purely because I've got them turned off on the SteamOS as well. So the RSR reduces the resolution to 16 by 900, 1600 by 900, and then tries to upscale to 1080p, and then AFMF generates what's called like fake frames, so it adds additional frames, so the gameplay feels a bit smoother, but that obviously introduces a bit of an input lag. And then I've got a Games 2 controller as well, which I've got connected via 2.4 gigahertz adapter. You can also connect it via Bluetooth. And if you're interested in a video review of the controller itself, I'll put the link in the video description below. Now, the Games controller has these two buttons on the back, so I've mapped them. One to open Armoury Crate, which is on the right, and then the left button to open the command center, where you can adjust your wattage, you can adjust certain settings as well. So as you can see, Armoury Crate works absolutely brilliantly with the Games here Cyclone 2 controller. However, command center does not at all. So there's nothing you can use or do with the command center to change, for example, the wattage on the fly, or the settings, the gamepads to auto mode, or literally anything else. You can't really do it. For that, you need to unfortunately employ a mouse and keyboard. Alternatively, there is also an app which is called Bluetooth Mouse and Keyboard for an Android, and there is also an app on iOS, which I will do a video on shortly. Now, I'm going to launch Fallout 76, and I'm going to do this for two reasons. First of all, Bethesda isn't very, is actually known for not the best optimization of its own games. So we're just going to see how it actually runs on Windows 11. Now, I've put about 526 hours in Fallout 76. I absolutely love this game. So we're just going to see how it performs without any additional Radeon super resolutions, AMFM 2.1 and stuff like that, just to show you the raw experience without any upscalers. And I'm going to do the same in SteamOS as well. I'm not going to use the built-in FSR, just to show you how basically the game works. And at the minute, the game doesn't work. So again, one of the perks of using Windows 11 is that it just doesn't work. So as you can see, the controller didn't work. So I'm gonna force close the game. Now, I can't do that using just the controller, so again, I'm going to employ my trusty keyboard and mouse just to force close the game and then reopen it again with a controller. So yeah, the Ally is docked to the LG C1 using my BenQ GR10 dock. It's a pretty decent dock. Can't even speak. It's a pretty decent dock. It supports HDMI 2.1. It supports VRR and 4K up to 120 Hz. Now, obviously, you can't really game in 4K up to 120 Hz in AAA titles, but it's a brilliant dock, and as you can see, it also doubles up as a stand. So if you're interested in the review of the dock itself, you can obviously check the link in the video description below, because I've also reviewed the dock, and it has been my go-to dock for all devices, really, because it works with an iPhone, S9 Tab, and so on, so on. So I'm gonna get my keyboard and mouse just to get the real-time monitor to show you what the performance is like in Fallout 76. This is not the only game I'm going to test, and I'm mainly going to focus on AAA titles because, as we know, most of the indie games do run really nicely on both Windows and SteamOS. Well, do we actually know? Obviously, I'm going to show you that. But as you can see, I get around 45 to 50 frames per second. That is obviously docked in 30 watts in turbo mode. So let's leave the power armor. And yeah, so as you can see, it's not only it's 45 to 50 frames per second, let's say 45, but it's also a slightly choppy experience, which I'm not really sure why, even though it does play at around, like as you have seen, 45 frames per second. Now, obviously, another perk of being on Windows is the Xbox PC app, which allows you to access games available on the PC Game Pass. Now, as you can see, again, not the best experience with a controller. I'm not saying it always happens. It's not the case. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and it's not the games here issue, because I've got exactly same problems with my Xbox controller and DualSense. In fact, actually, the DualSense doesn't actually work in the Xbox app. It only works in game. Now, one of the recent additions, when I say recent, I think it dropped around April, May time, is that you actually have an on-screen keyboard now in the Xbox app and everywhere else, which you can use with a controller as well. So as you can see, yes, like I said, a big perk of having Windows 11 is being able to access Xbox PC Game Pass. Obviously, that's only if you do actually subscribe to PC Game Pass. I do actually subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate. Now, the Game Pass Ultimate, I think if you buy a new ROG Ally, or even a used one, but you log in for the first time, you can actually claim, I think, still up to 3 months of Game Pass Ultimate, which is a nice perk of having ROG Ally with Windows 11. So other than that, as you can see, I've launched Dead Cells. It works just fine. Even though I've got it set up to 10 watts, it did run at around 14. But yeah, the game looks absolutely fine and works absolutely fine. But then obviously you've got the GOG, for example, or the EA app, which unfortunately both of them do not support any sort of controller input. So you have to use a keyboard, mouse. Obviously you always have a keyboard and a mouse in front of your TV. If you want to use this, and as you can see, nothing's happening. To be honest, GOG doesn't even have games sort filter by controller input. So, and now we're gonna have some handheld experience, but as it is with Fallout and Bethesda, for some weird reason the game decided to launch in 16 by 900, so you have to change that resolution to 1920 to 1080p in order to match the screen. And as you can see, in handheld mode we are getting around 35. Let's actually increase the SPPT and FPPT. So FPPT will run in 35 watts for about a minute, and SPPT for about 30 in the next 5 minutes. But as you can see, actually here, the fans kick in. And on the ROG Ally, you can't really, as you can see, those micro stutters. On the original ROG Ally, you can't really reduce the fan curve that much due to the infamous SD card issue. Now, I'm glad to inform and I'm happy to report that the SD card issue has been fixed since, I think, July 2024, when mine went in for repairs because they've started sending revised motherboards to the repair centers. There's actually a really good video from ROG Global around the memory card fix. Unfortunately, it does mean that you have to send your ROG Ally for repairs. However, I can happily report that since then my memory card has been working absolutely fine. Now, when I say since then, I did have an ROG Ally, then I had Ally X, and then I went back with ROG Ally, which is this one. I've bought it used, but with a changed motherboard, and it's brilliant. And this is Helldivers 2, so another quite demanding game. Now, this one I'm running in 16 by 900 and ultra quality upscaler, the built-in upscaler, which gives us about 45 frames per second. Now, let's land, deploy, and help some lost soul. Help the lost soul, or the lost soul will help me. So let's have a look where we are, what's going on in here. Okay, I know everyone's on a bog planet right now, and I'm on an illuminate planet, but this is the last planet I've played on, so I've just decided to deploy again. But I do promise to go back to bog planets once this test has been finished. So as you can see, pretty decent performance. I'm actually quite surprised. Now, this is in a low preset, not even Steam Deck preset, because I've noticed in the Steam Deck preset, for some reason, the game drops to about 35 frames per second. So here we go. Quite a lot of action, as it is on the Illuminate planets, which is also why I've decided to drop on Illuminate planet, purely because obviously you've got the buildings, there's a lot going on, so it definitely does help measuring the performance rather than different planets with less environment and so on. So just want to make sure that obviously if I do perform any tests, I do perform these tests on quite dense populated planets where a lot is going on, even if it's just 2 or 3 players, because the game is quite infamous for having worse performance when there is more players. Now I'm going to swap the SSD, and for the sake of the test itself and the comparisons, I'm using exactly the same SSD. This is actually my old ROG Ally, the original one I had SSD, because when I sold my ROG Ally, I've replaced it with a 1 terabyte SSD, and then the old SSD stayed with me. So I've decided I'm going to put SteamOS on it, and then I'm going to have 2 SSDs. One is with Windows, the other one is with SteamOS on it. So yeah, as you can see, it doesn't take much time or effort. All you have to do is unscrew 6 screws and then open the device, unscrew, well, the 7th screw, which is the one that's holding the SSD, and then we put the backplate on. Now do remember to connect the device when you've changed the SSD, because I don't know if you've noticed, when I was changing the SSD, I've also disconnected the battery, which has to be connected back in place. So this is SteamOS. This SteamOS is the Steam on the main and stable channel. Now this is SteamOS 3.8 with a recent release and update from June, July. So I've tried to keep things as up to date as possible. Now I do have the simple Decky, as I think it's called Simple TDP, installed as well. However, I'm going to show you the features of the SteamOS as well. Now, one of the cool things is CEC, which means that when you turn the ROG Ally or Ally Deck or Steam Ally, as you prefer to call it, the CEC will kick in, well, turn on the TV as well, which is actually quite nice. And as you will see, it's definitely better docked experience than Windows 11. Okay, so let's have a look. Yep, controller, ROG Ally. Now, again, I'm going to use the in handheld, and I'm also going to use it in the docked mode. And this is the side panel, where you can change your performance. So you can have the performance mode performance, balanced, and low profile. So on top of that, you can also change the frame limit. You can turn it off. You can turn VRR on. You can turn the VRR off. There's actually quite a lot of things you can change in SteamOS. I think it's called Game Scope, if I remember correctly, that side panel, which you don't get in the Steam Big Picture mode on Windows 11. So that's that simple decky TDP, that's the one. And again, if you want, you can change additional settings as well. You can change the TDP of your GPU. Now I've got it set to 30 watts, but you can go the minimum of 12 and a maximum of 40. So there's actually quite a lot. Now the minimum, I think it goes down to 5. However, I found most of the games, even the ones that run really smoothly on 10 watts, to really underperform in 5 watts. That's where Steam Deck actually does outshine the Ally. So for me, 10 watts is decent enough. And then when it comes to the upper range, 30 watts again is decent enough for me as well. Now, obviously, you can set it up per game profile as well. You don't have to, you know, do it in general across the board. You can set up per game profiles on SteamOS. So again, we're going to launch Fallout 76. And let's see what's happening now. I haven't got any mods or anything like that installed on Fallout 76. Yes, I am aware of mods that and ini files that allow you to, for example, switch off the VSync. You can remove grass and blur and everything like that. On both devices, well, on both operating systems, I've got Fallout 76 running raw. So no changes whatsoever to the game itself. Okay, maybe let's not go with the performance overlay level 4. Let's go with 3 because we don't need that much info. Okay, so it seems like I've spawned in someone else's house. So let's probably leave this place, and then I'm gonna spawn in the golf club. Let's have a look. But as you can see, the game does feel a lot of smoother. I've tried to record the whole video in 30 frames per second, so you can actually see that, because if the video would be recorded in 30, you wouldn't really see that much of a change. Now, in terms of the performance profiles, if you don't want to download simple decky TDP and you don't want to mess up with the GPU settings, low profile is basically around 10 watts, the balanced is around 15 watts, and then the performance mode is around 25 to 30 watts. Now, I do believe that in one of the beta updates for SteamOS, there is also an option to change the TDP, but I'm keeping it with the stable releases. Okay, so let's help this guy over here. Someone's attacking their house. So let's just crack on. But to be honest, for the sake of the whole video comparison, I'm just going to reload, and I'm going to find a map where I can get my house back so that you can see the performance. So, you know, there are no there's no differentiator. There is no change in basically the game I'm playing and the map I'm playing and the layout I'm playing in. So as you can see, it's exactly the same, and I'm playing handheld. So the Windows 11 on Ally kinda underperformed. When I say underperformed, obviously it was between 35 to 45. As you can see, we are slightly above that, and definitely smoother, because it's not always about the frames per second. Yes, it is quite important, but also about the overall smoothness of the game you are playing. And next stop is Helldivers 2, and again we're gonna drop on an Illuminate planet. Well, not Illuminate planet, but a planet that Illuminate have attacked. As you can see, this time I'm playing in 1920 by 1080 resolution, because SteamOS just allows me to do that. And as you can see, it's very similar, if not the same performance as 1600 by 900 on Windows 11. So there you have it, a bit better performance on SteamOS. Okay, so let's see, and this time I'm playing with actually 4 players as opposed to 2, 3 on Windows 11. So for some reason, Helldivers 2 does suffer some performance hits when you play with more players. So yeah, that's unfortunate, but as you can see, as you've seen, the performance was decent enough. Now, when it comes to the docked performance, not decked, docked performance, again, you've got access to game scope. All you have to do is press the Xbox button or the Games Here button and A, and it opens game scope, which allows you to adjust the TDP and all the features on the fly. So not like on the command center on Windows 11 where you can't really do it with a controller. You are more than welcome to do it with a controller on the SteamOS, which again, I'm not gonna say it's a better operating system. Both have their pros and cons. However, as you can see, it is a bit more controller friendly, and it just works that much better when it comes to playing with a controller or even handheld. Right. While I'm here, I'm just gonna do my daily to have a look. Yeah, definitely better performance on the SteamOS. Not every game is like that. However, some of the games, like for example Grid Motorsport, runs similar, to be honest. So in my opinion, when it comes to performance, both operating systems are there, quite close to each other. However, obviously the big benefit and a big perk of Windows 11 is that you have access to Game Pass. However, if you do decide to go the SteamOS route, or you don't care about Game Pass, or you do have Game Pass, you can obviously always use GeForce Now. Now, obviously GeForce Now is a paid experience. Yes, you do have the free tier, but it takes like forever to get a rig, and those rigs are slightly underperforming. So I'm using the performance tier, so the middle tier, and I'm gonna play Doom Dark Ages. But as I've said before, you do have access to game scope in any app you'd like, any game you'd like, modern app. Yes, you don't really have lossless scaling and stuff like that. You don't get access to that. Saying that, however, for me, lossless scaling, I could never get it to work without a significant input lag. For me, it's always a huge input lag. And obviously a big benefit of GeForce Now is that you can run games on quite a high detail. So I don't think I would be able to run Doom the Dark Ages in 2560 by 1440. And on high settings. Yes, I am streaming the game, and yes, you can also use the GeForce Now on Windows. However, it's a slightly better docked experience when it comes to GeForce Now on SteamOS. Don't get me wrong, performance-wise, it's exactly the same performance because it's obviously relying on your internet connection. I'm using 65 megabits per second. Well, this is at least my broadband, because here in UK we are about 2,000 years behind everyone else when it comes to broadband speeds. And I live in the 4th biggest city in UK, and I do not have access to 1 gigs where other cities do in UK, but that's by the by. So as you can see, everything works quite well on the docked Ally. On GeForce Now, you can obviously use it docked or undocked. Saying that, obviously GeForce Now does require a reliable internet connection, so you can't really get a decent performance on a, I don't know, hotel or airport or bus stop Wi-Fi if you live in a country that does actually have Wi-Fi in bus stops, like for example Poland, Romania, and so on. So yeah, as you can see, it's actually working quite well. Let's use the cycler for this, because I don't think I can use anything else in here. I'm running low on Super Shotgun. Have you guys played Doom Dark Ages? How are you finding it? I'm a big fan of first-person shooters, or as we boomers tend to say, first-person perspective shooters, FPP. But yeah, I'm actually enjoying Doom: The Dark Ages. Maybe not the first levels, but later on the game does actually shine, and it's a good old Doom game. I do really like the Captain America shield as well. And then you've got these two lovely features where you can log into your Steam Ally or Ally deck using just your controller when it's docked. Again, very nice feature when you use your Ally docked. And the brilliant suspend feature, which suspends whatever you are doing without too much hit on your battery life. So yeah, overall, which OS is better? I think, in my opinion, it depends what you play. If you're heavily invested in Game Pass, I would probably stick to Windows 11. If you don't really care that much about Game Pass, SteamOS is the way to go. I prefer, performance-wise, the SteamOS itself. However, because I've got quite a few games on Windows 11, I tend to swap that SSD to Windows 11 more often than not. However, when I do plan on going out and about and stuff like that, I do prefer SteamOS purely because of the suspend feature and how much more nicer and convenient it is to use it handheld. So yeah, thanks for watching another episode of Quick Expert Reviews, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!